Have you ever skipped out on a game at launch that you were initially excited for? Well, Lies of P was that game for me. It came out about a month after Baldur's Gate 3, which was frankly a death sentence for me. I and many others were still romancing and clicking our way through menus for 8 hours a day. It was a full-time job. However, this caused me to miss Lies of P at launch, even though lying and murdering creepy puppets is my favorite weekend activity. The other problem was it felt like there's been so many lackluster attempts at Soulslike games, so it was hard for me to get too excited. Most of them have not lived up to FromSoft's mastercrafted... Is that a word? Oh god. Oh fuck. What? That is not what I mean. Well, there's a boat, but whatever. Most of them have not lived up to From Software's multiple masterpieces. However, I've seen the reviews. I thought it was time to dive into the game for myself, and honestly, after only a couple minutes, I knew I was in for something good, and by the first boss, I was in love with this new game. But should you play Lies of P? Is this game worth it? Well, I can't wait anymore. From the very first moments I played this game, I've been excited to talk about this game, so let's get right into it. Lies of P takes place in the dystopian puppet-infested city of Krat and retells the main plot of Pinocchio with a unique psycho puppet twist. The puppets have taken over the city, and P, our main wannabe boy, embarks on a journey to rescue his creator and daddy, Geppetto. I don't know how they missed just calling him Big G or something, like come on. Anyways, Krat faces not only the puppet rebellion, but also the petrification disease, transforming victims into monstrous, throbbing creatures. As P backstabs puppets, stalkers, mutated citizens, he's slowly uncovering all the secrets and lore the city has buried within. And right off the bat, I loved this setting. Same as like when I first played Bloodborne. I was immediately hooked into the art design and art style for everything from the city to the characters. When I said I was hooked in the first couple minutes, I mean it. Waking up and picking up your first weapon, I was immediately satisfied and I was sucked in by this environment. And in my opinion, the story to gameplay balance in this game is somewhere similar to Sekiro. The plot is a little more front and center, but not to the extremes of something like a God of War or Spider-Man. However, definitely more than some of the other Souls games where the majority of the story is told in item description. Using this familiar plot as a foundation and expanding on it with a darker twist, the lore might not go as deep as some other Souls games, but there's still quite a bit under the surface, and I think using that story foundation made it a lot easier for people like myself to actually connect to the story and piece all the puzzles together, whereas some Souls games can be a little difficult without watching numerous videos. Now there is one downside to the slightly more linear nature of this game, and that is it does hinder the replay value, I think, a little bit. Other than just trying out a new weapon type on a subsequent playthrough, I don't think there's quite as much to uncover in the lore on a repeat playthrough. And if you like the replayability of games like Dark Souls, this one won't quite satiate your thirst for new lore every new playthrough. But that's just my experience. After a quarter of a second playthrough, being a little lackluster with new content or a new understanding of the plot. You do get tons of options throughout the game though to either lie or tell the truth, and this will change the ending and outcome of characters in the game, but I will leave that for you to figure out. By the end, I was very, very satisfied with the story, and I cannot wait to see where this series or a second title or some DLC might go in the future. And one other thing before we move on, the voice acting in this game is absolutely outstanding, and it really helps bring these fairy tale characters to life. And some other games in the Souls-like genre might not have the budget because they're a little bit more indie than like this game, which is kind of, I think, more of a considered a AA title. But again, in here it is a solid title, and I didn't have any problems with any of the performances, anything like that. Okay, but how is the gameplay? As that's one of the main reasons that people really like these games. And I'll say at the start, I was a tad dissatisfied hearing so many people say this is one of the hardest Souls games out there. The first couple of bosses honestly were a bit of a breeze for me, but towards the middle and end things kind of started to change. If you salivate over Bloodborne and Sekiro's combat, I think you will really enjoy what this game has to offer. And if you haven't played those games yet, but you prefer games that let you tailor your combat style to your own preference, I think you will also love this as well. As a self-proclaimed Sekiro master, this game's perfect parry really kicked my butt. It's one of the main elements to this game's combat. It takes getting used to, but towards the end I was pretty comfortable. You can try dodging and rolling out of the way, but be warned, lots of enemies will slide right up in your face and smack you with a greatsword. So be ready to master the parry and blocking as soon as you can. And I have to applaud this team for doing a good job in still the parrying mechanic. I know there were some issues when this game came out with that window being very short. I don't know if that's still true or not. It was a little difficult, but I don't know if it's not exactly the most consistent thing, I would say, still, but I was able to almost usually get it when I needed to, and it didn't feel unfair, which is, I think, is the main thing that could easily be messed up, where games like Jedi Fallen Order, which for me was a complete bust, and that was totally based off of the pairing. There were so many times where things just felt like they should have clicked and they didn't. And maybe part of the problem was I played Jedi Fallen Order right after Sekiro, but it was something that played and really ruined that title, and here, that is not the case, and I'm so excited that it isn't. Lies of P, while difficult, still nails these elements, which is especially impressive for developers on a first go around. Now onto the weapon options, as this game gives you the ability to merge a handle and blade into one unique weapon, and I really love this system. And while I did kind of end up using a very basic bitch combo for the second half of the game, which was a curved greatsword dex build kinda, in the beginning, I was still figuring out the system, and I was labbing all different kinds of combos, and it was honestly a lot of fun for me. It's not too complex, and I wasn't too bogged down by menus, where like games like Monster Hunter can get really overwhelming for me, but this was pretty easy. But that's not really all, because you also can change the characteristics of your left arm, which gives you the ability to do things like shock enemies, grapple them, or shoot fire. And you can change these at a rest stop on the fly, or they call them stargazers in this game. And it's pretty easy, and you will want to do that for upcoming encounters. You'll probably need almost maybe 2 or 3 configurations that you're kind of comfortable with, because certain bosses definitely require different circumstances and loadouts. But personally, my favorite was just the fire. Maybe I'm just a scrub normie, but I don't know, I just like shooting fire at things. And the last but not least system in this game is your P organ. I know, I get it, but this is a very important element to building your P. This is the way you will be able to add permanent buffs to various elements in the game, such as ergo consumption cost or stagger, as well as giving you a lot more health vials or P magic shit for all your weapon arts, which are also determined by your blade and handle combo. There's so much to mess around here, and if you enjoy that kind of thing, I think you will be sucked in this game even more than I am, and it's definitely one of the more mechanically in-depth Souls-likes that I have personally played. If I do have one recommendation though, before you go into this game, it is really be careful of your weapon's durability, especially when enemies start flinging decay from every orifice. Your durability meter goes down really fast in this game, and you will need to sharpen that bad boy up. Now next, of course, you cannot talk about one of these games without talking about the boss fights, and they were a real highlight in this game as well. And while I will leave a little bit more discussion about them to a kind of more spoiler section towards the end, I will say get ready to do some pairing, like I said earlier, and get ready to master your timing, as there are some really delayed attacks from some of those late game bosses. There are, of course, some hits and misses among the cast of malfunctioning puppets and diseased monstrosities. There is a little over 20 bosses, with the latter half of the game boasting plenty of optional ones, and the best of which never failed to entertain me and keep me on the edge of my seat, and hyped every single time I entered a boss arena for another round after I've died. And one last thing before I talk about the next thing, the music, especially for some of the bosses, is absolutely stellar. It is beautiful, and the first time I changed the music in Hotel Krat, where you do a lot of your upgrades, I just sat around and I was just vibing. I wanted to stop playing the game for a bit. I was done for the night, but I couldn't. I had to finish the song. I was immediately blown away at some of the music in this game. It is so beautiful. And it is a great thing that the music is so amazing, because the level design is another standout in my opinion. and most of the time feels like the most frequently mishandled element of a lot of other Souls-like that I played. And honestly, in Lies of P, it was almost indistinguishable from other main Soulsborne games. I never really got lost during my entire experience, where it became frustrating at least. There were plenty of satisfying shortcuts to uncover and secret items to find. To me, there is nothing more satisfying in a good Souls game than a good shortcut. Which is great because in real life, shortcuts almost never work. And I live for the moments where you end up in an area you completed like 2 hours ago. I don't think this whole map is quite as intricately weaved as, say, Dark Souls 1, but it's still pretty good. And maybe most importantly is each area felt very distinct and fun to explore. I never got bored of just running through the same hallways again in an open area. Even some of the best games in this hard games genre, like Nioh 2, were bogged down by boring level design on occasion, but here it was just so consistently crafted throughout the entire experience. Almost every boss runback is near the main encounter, which is another thing that is kind of a pet peeve for a lot of games in this genre. This game is pretty generous with its checkpoints, and I don't think I ever got too frustrated. And in my personal opinion, in the levels, my standouts were probably the arcade and the exhibition hall, as well as the main streets of Krat itself in the opening area. These were the points in the game where I really just had to take that minute to take it all in, look at all the different architecture, and just kind of slow down for just 1 second, which I don't do in a lot of other Souls games. I'm constantly just trying to get to the next fight or the next boss or whatever. And here I think that's one of the biggest selling points for this game, is that you can just take those moments to just look around a little bit. And that arcade is probably the best example of a perfectly handcrafted maze that by the end feels like a triumph when you exit the other side. The only time I kind of felt a tad annoyed was in a long climb towards the final area of the game. You'll probably get what I mean when you get there yourself though, but honestly, no game is 100% perfect in my opinion, so that's a minor complaint in the grand 25-ish hour experience of this game. Alright, now I'm just going to go in a quick little boss discussion because I just felt like I couldn't talk about the game without talking a little bit about the bosses. Right off the bat, my personal favorite is Laxasia or Power Visa, the complete one. Every single time I ran into that boss arena, and trust me, it was a lot. It was probably like 30 so times. I was getting up there before I finally defeated Laxasia, but oh my god, I just felt so hyped every single time I went into this fight, and I was so excited to finally beat this puppet thing. I don't know, whatever it is. Sometimes I get completely confused if this thing is a puppet or a human. Maybe I am crazy, but I just really loved learning this boss fight, and it was the biggest standout for me. And when I hit that phase 2, I was just like, oh my god, I was in pain, but also enjoying it so much. Now, the early boss fights were a little easy, I think I said that earlier, but I think the first one that really took me by surprise was probably the Black Rabbit Brotherhood. When you had all of them just coming right at you, I didn't know what to do at first, so I did end up throwing out one of the spectators that you can get in this game, and that one definitely made it easy for a while, but I also find it sometimes a little bit annoying because sometimes you just really cannot predict where they're gonna hit when you throw out that spectator, so that became a little bit of an issue for some of these, and sometimes I would try to use them to help out a little bit, and sometimes the spectator would just become a complete hindrance to everything I was doing. I think my most annoying one was probably the green monster of the swamp. Again, I think I probably alluded to it a little bit earlier, but decay in this game is just awful, and I felt like I was constantly getting hit with its decay attack and having to resharpen my weapon, which just had me open for more attacks, and it was just an overall little bit of a punishing experience. But then you also have fights like the King of Puppets, which I think was really fun just because I love his design. I think he just looks so cool, and I think I probably almost like that more than maybe the boss fight itself, but I just love looking at his like big boy design, not as like the little guy in the machine, but I like the big boy King of Puppet design. He looks so cool, and he's got that element of like, I don't know, I'm not that bad, but you just want to beat the hell out of me, and like, I don't know what's your problem, so I guess I'm gonna fight back. The final boss is Simon Manus, and he's pretty cool. I was able to beat him in only a couple attempts, I guess, but I don't know, just something about his design, while weirdly cool, is also just weirdly gross, and it's kind of one of those that's almost a little too much. He's another one that has those sometimes crazy delayed attacks as well, where it's hard to time things, and that becomes annoying. And he's got plenty of little projectiles that are just shooting around everywhere, and especially in the second phase. And then the last is the secret final boss, of course. That's the nameless puppet, and I thought he was pretty cool, but I feel like this thing does so much damage every time it hits you, and that was getting so annoying. And that's why I probably end up thinking that Luxatia is 100% my favorite boss, because while this one is, I don't even know if it's harder, it was just more annoying, because every time you got hit with even like the slightest thing, it felt like it was like half my health bar. It felt ridiculous. But anyways, that's the end of this video. I really hope that you give this game a chance, because I think it really deserves it. And like myself, I think you will not be disappointed. I think as soon as you buy this game and you start out playing it, if you like some of the games I mentioned earlier, I think you're gonna really enjoy this experience and you're gonna have a lot of fun. Anyways, I really appreciate that you watched this video, and I hope you have a good one. Crack out.